Hi, I'm Jo, and I've allowed myself to be intimidated by sewing machines for far too long. Why? Well, you know when you put your foot on the pedal and it goes and you put your foot down a little bit and it's not enough, and then you put your foot down a lot and then the machine shoots off. And I've had experiences with a machine being repeatedly jammed and being helpless to do anything about it, but that's a story for another time. And so that kind of instilled a little bit of the sewing machine. And I thought, well, it's fine, I can hand sew. I can make my own clothes by hand, it will be fine. And I have so far mended a few holes and sewn on a few buttons, and that is it. I've reached a tipping point. My desire for well-fitting, long-lasting clothes has overcome my uneasiness around the machine a bit. Full disclosure, I have sat down prior to sitting down to talking to you to just get to grips with the sewing machine. I spoke to my other half who can sew with the machine, and he suggested to use thick fabric and just sew for a bit, which is what I did. And I accidentally made something useful. I've ended up with what I'm going to use as a bookmark and have got this little pouch thing, which I'm quite pleased about. I also fixed my handbag, which was fraying a bit. It's a little bit wonky, but I was pleased with myself because I'd fixed a thing. So now I'm ready for my first project. And I thought the perfect first project would be a pillow form. This cushion will be for this seat here, which is a bucket seat. It goes in at the back and it pushes my shoulders forward. Then I always end up with shoulder ache and neck ache sitting in it if I sit back. So this will hopefully sort that out for me. And what I've got is this pillowcase that you can't tell, but I have ironed it. It's unironed itself. Basically, this is my way of saying I don't want to iron it again, don't make me please. So yeah, what I'm going to do is measure this thing, mark out my measurements on this, cut it out, overlock it so that it doesn't fray. If you look in your manual, there might be a setting for overlocking. It might be referred to as overcasting. They're the same thing. You can also use a serger, but I don't have a serger, so I'm going to be overlocking and then sew it together. So the trickiest part of this is going to be the measuring, because I'm really bad at measuring things. Yay! That is about 40 centimeters squared. The problem with this is that because it is an old pillowcase, it has stretched the fabric a bit, so you can't quite get it flat. I'm going to keep this side here intact, and I'm going to measure in 40 centimeters this way. And this is the top, and this is all kind of raggedy and holy, so I don't want this end. So I'm going to use the bottom up, about 40 centimeters there. I'm also going to want some, seam allowance. I don't know how much half an inch is in centimeters, so I'm just going to do 3 centimeters. The thing I've learnt about measuring out fabric is it's actually quite tricky to go in a straight line. So something I recommend, well, something that I tried that seemed to work okay, is to kind of go along and measure out, say if you want to do 3 centimeters, measure out 3 centimeters and then 3 centimeters, and then just join up the dots. I don't know if that's a sound tip, but it worked for me. I should probably get one of those, you know, plastic rulers that the pros use. Now, snip, snip. Okay, the first snip. I didn't expect to not like this as much. Okay, this is an old pillowcase. If it gets wrecked, it's fine. This is not expensive silk. Okay, I've made my cut. I did use material scissors, but somehow I got a jaggedy edge. I guess this is something I get used to, but as for now, I'm just going to overlock these edges and then I can pin it together. So let's go do that. Before I get started, I've got this little test swatch and I want to do a few test stitches to see if everything's set up okay before I go to my final project. So I've got a fairly fine fabric here. So what I want is a finer needle. I have been using this to stitch with denim, so it probably won't be okay, but I'm going to try it and see if it leaves any holes because I've not changed the needle yet and I don't want to learn just yet if I don't have to. But also I want to play around with stitch lengths, because apparently the finer the fabric that you use, the smaller the stitch length that you want to use, and that's something to do with tension and bunching and stuff. The thing I found that might be most useful is the numbering systems when it comes to thread and needles. So with needles, the smaller the number, the finer the needle, but with thread, the larger the number, the smaller the thread, and that's because that goes by weight. So say you've got a yard of thread and that makes 60 grams. I'm going to designate that 1. But I want 60 grams of another thread and that takes 7 yards. So I'm going to designate that 7. So that's why thread numbers are higher and needle numbers are smaller. So yeah, now time to sew. Smaller. Come on. This is the size overlocking stitch I want to use. I had to make it slightly smaller. I'm going to toy with making it a bit narrower as well. Move that down to 3. Okay. By the way, if you find that when you lift your foot you can't actually pull your work away from your thread very far, what you do is you turn your wheel towards you a bit, and that way that loosens up this section, which enables you to pull your thread clear so you can snip it. It's the same if the machine gets stuck. Sometimes the machine just won't go forwards, and gently turning the wheel slightly towards you gets it going again. If it resists, you probably have a thread jam. Also, there's a little thing on the side here that I have been warned not to catch my knuckles on. Apparently some people do that, and it hurts. I've been warned not to do that, and I'm warning you too because I'm nice like that. On my machine I have a handy button that reverses the stitch, but I do find it unnerving to take my hands away from the steering to press it. Done! Look. Quite pleased with that. Now I've got to set the machine back to how it was so I can do a straight stitch, but first gonna do it on here so I know what stitch length I would like. Do I want to go smaller than 2? No, absolutely not. Here's where I tried the stitch tension 1, and here's where I went to 2, and you can see the tension was all wonky when I went too low. So I'm going to stick with 2 because that looks nice and neat. But first I've got to pin my project together. Hopefully that'll be neater than my cutting. So this is where I'm going to leave a gap to add in my stuffing. So I'm going to sew up to here, back stitch, and then up to here, and then round. And then I don't have to do these 2 sides because they are already stitched. 'Tis done. I've been kind of overthinking things and wondering whether or not I should kind of like do a rolled hem just to make it stronger. But none of the other pillow form videos I've seen have done this, so I'm going to say stuff it. Ba-da! Now, I'm going to cut some corners. Yeah, I like puns here. What I've got to do is snip off these corners, not cutting the seam I've done. I guess that's enough. Before I go and overlock those corners that I've just cut, I'm going to turn this the right side in and see what it looks like. I'm going to try and find the entrance first. I've got myself a knitting needle here. Ooh, look at these. It looks good and everything. That looks good. I was a bit worried there. Yay, okay. So I'm going to go overlock the corners and I will be back for some stuffing. Oof. So this is a multi-purpose, non-allergenic, washable polyester filling. I want this to be quite a thick, dense pillow, so I'm going to squish this up and firmly but gently push this down into the corner. I'm aiming for maximum puff. Oh, for scale. Yeah. That is an entire bag pretty much of this stuff, and that's a 450 gram bag of stuffing into one pillow. Yes, that is the kind of fluff I'm looking for. Nice and firm. Before I sew it up, I'm gonna do a test. Comfy? I do wonder if it's going to push me forward off my seat. I'm going to go with it. If it's too thick, nah. Time to sew the entrance closed now, because this is a hand sew job. I get to hand sew something, yay! This is ridiculous. Okay, what I'm going to do to sew this closed is, see these ends kind of want to fold in naturally. I'm going to let them, and I'm going to want my knot on the inside of the fabric. So pull that through like this. Maybe I've got too much stuffing in this. You know what, I'm going to take some stuffing out because this is crazy. You can do this with a whip stitch or something called a ladder stitch. I'm going to use a ladder stitch because I use the same thing in knitting when you sew two parts of your projects together. I'm sewing inside to outside, first one side and then the other. This forms a type of zigzag stitch that forms a ladder effect. I don't think what I'm doing here is the wrong way to do it, but I probably would have found it easier stitching along the top of the edge. Then again, that probably wouldn't have made too much difference which way I'd done it if I had just remembered to tuck the stitches closed, which I didn't. So at the end I talk about my stitches not being as neat as I like, and editing me now knows why, and now so do you, before I do. This is the first time I've done this on a cushion, by the way. I'm very, very happy with the sides. I mean, it looks lumpy, but that's because it's a cushion, so it's only as lumpy as it should be. It's very squishy. The only downside really is my hand sewing, unfortunately. But I do prefer this to the thought of just kind of sewing across, because that would leave a tab. You know what, the bit in the middle is actually not too bad. But other than that, I'm very happy because you're not going to see that. That's on the bottom. It doesn't exist, so haha. So now that I've done this, I have created charts. Basically what I've done, because I wanted to chart my progress from beginner to hopefully one day advanced, I created a list of all the things I need to cover. I mean, there are going to be things that I haven't thought about because I don't know what I don't know yet. So I'm going to be adding to it as time goes along. But once I've completed something from the list, I can tick it off. But I would feel guilty if I just ticked something off without actually having learnt it properly. So I've also implemented a traffic light system. So red means I've done something once. Amber means I know what I'm doing without having to look stuff up or kind of having to read the manual. And green means I'm good. Not I'm perfect, but I'm competent at it. So it's not an I'm perfect badge, because that could possibly not be attainable on some things. This is what my progress looked like before I started. The difference that this project has made is this. I know I've got a long way to go, but I intend to enjoy it, and I hope you come with me on this. If you've got any tips or tricks for me, I would be very grateful if you left them in the comments. Thank you very much for that. And if you're a beginner, I hope this kind of made sewing seem a bit less daunting if you were on the fence about it, or you just kind of like enjoyed watching somebody else suffer learning to sew. So if you want to join me learning to make things, please subscribe. I have a cat. She makes an appearance from time to time if you need further enticement. And until next time, farewell. This is parts me going, here's what I've learned. I hope it helps you, and part, this is where I'm stuck. Please help me.